Hello, Tumblr teachers and the rest of the community who will be possibly viewing this presentation. Bear with me, I'm a little nervous about doing this whole YouTube thing. So if I stutter or stare off into the distance, just know I'm also reading off of some notes that I've written on Microsoft Word. So I may look a little deer in the headlights at times. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, I just figured I'd give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm a certified teacher who has been working as a teacher's aide at the middle school levels, primarily working with students with special needs. Most of the things I will be discussing today probably pertain more to working with those middle grades, since I will be discussing things about moving along with classes or talking about working with more than one teacher. But I encourage all of you later on to share your experiences working in the elementary grades, the high school level, or even the collegiate level in a Google Hangout later this summer. A date will be to be announced. In this presentation, I'm going to approach this in two different ways. The first part of this, I will be discussing what exactly a teacher aide is and a little bit of information about the job itself, as well as talking about some tips and tricks that I would like to give you guys to utilize your teachers more effectively. In the second half of this, I'll also be giving tricks to teacher aides themselves, because I'm sure there's a few others out there in the teaching community, not just me, that probably could benefit from a few of my experiences. So, with that said, let's begin. So, what exactly is a teacher aide? I feel like this is kind of a very fluid term, because when you think of a teacher aide, most might think of an assistant in a college setting. Others may think of a person who helps in elementary school. Others may just simply call us paraprofessionals and have some other idea of us whatsoever. I think if we were to nail down a specific definition, it wouldn't necessarily apply to every district or every grade level. So I'm going to give you a definition just as a definition. My definition is a teacher's aide is a person who works with a classroom teacher to provide educational assistance. In my case, my job description included specifically working with students with individualized education plans, or IEPs as we know. In our district, we had two types of teacher aides, general aides and one-on-one aides. For the past 2-ish years, I have been a general aide. This means that I work with a group of students in the classroom as opposed to following one student around to provide assistance to them. Of course, there were some students that required more assistance in the classroom than others, so I primarily followed those around throughout the day. Teachers' aides have a lot of different responsibilities, especially when working with students with special needs. Some have had to deal with things like toileting and lifting students and restraining them, and other tasks that maybe the main classroom teacher might not have to be responsible for. I haven't had to work with students in that way before, but I have had to make some significant accommodations for my students. For instance, last year I spent a lot of my time in the copy room making enlargements for 2 of my students with severe vision impairment. Sometimes this has affected my ability to do the job I needed to do, because I was constantly running back and forth to the copy room during instruction, making it hard for me to know what the task I was supposed to do with those students. Of course, this could have been avoided in a variety of different ways, but I'm saving that for a little bit later in the video. Teacher aides do not require a college degree in most states, but a lot of positions like to see that you have attended some college or have something like an associate's degree. Some actually just require a high school diploma as well. Some states also require that you take a para-pro test, which is provided through ETS, as just like the praxis exam, which from the research I've done, it kind of looks like a general knowledge test. I've included a link with more information about this test into my Google folder. If you have a bachelor's degree, most schools will waive this test because in their eyes, they think that you are highly qualified to teach students in this way. I have a master's, obviously, in education, so I didn't have to take any of these tests. So if you've taken these tests before, I'd love to hear some insight about them. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median salary range for a teacher's aide is about $23,000 a year. Trust me, this is a median. I won't get into details, but I would be excited to be earning that much money a year as a teacher's aide. We are often paid hourly, and most of us are not full-time employees, which means that our districts do not provide us with health insurance or benefits, or other things of that nature. So now that we've defined what a teacher aide is and how to go about becoming one, I figured I'd discuss how you can use your aides effectively in the classroom. Teacher aides often get a lot of the grunt work, and oftentimes this is a bit of a burden on us. I don't think that teachers do this intentionally, but when you have a second person in the room, it's really hard not to use them in this way. I'm sure we're all guilty of doing this on occasion. I mean, I was standing in front of the classroom a lot while the teacher ran out to go to the bathroom, and I did have a few teachers that whenever I was in their room, this was their pee time, if you will. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I don't think that we should use that as a habit or make that a habit. Teacher aides are hired to assist you, but in the case of special ed aides, we are also in charge of the students that we're assigned to. So if we're constantly running out of the room to be your copy person or errand girl or boy, then we're putting our kids at a disadvantage. A lot of the times we forget about the accommodations those students need until the last minute, and it's often left to the teacher aide to help rectify this situation. Hence my constant running back and forth to the copy room last year, making enlargements that could have probably been done the day before or even given some prior notice when I came into the school that day. I don't want you to think that teachers' aides shouldn't do this kind of work. But if we can make sure that we have a healthy balance of helping you and assisting our students, then I think it will be a lot more effective in the long run. Which leads me to my second point. I want to talk about collaboration and the presence of the aide in the classroom. Collaboration, I think, is a key element in ensuring all students in your classroom have a successful experience there. In the middle grades, you are often working with at least 5 core teachers who are all doing different and exciting things in their classroom. Making sure that you invite your aide in on your planning process, I think, would be a great way to get everyone on the same page to ensure all students get what they need. Over the years, I've had a lot of teachers ask me for my advice on a variety of different lessons, and sometimes they've often given me the chance to actually make the tests for my students, which I've really enjoyed. Over the years, my favorite is when I can sit with the teacher and make those proper accommodations for the students I work with. I see my students in most of their classes and specific study skills room where they can get individualized help on their schoolwork. So I often have more of an idea of what they can handle and what they are capable of than just using the IEP and what they've seen in their classroom. I often find that some teachers will cut way too much of an assignment for students, and I have been guilty about erasing some of those circles on those worksheets to give that student a little bit more of a challenge. Or I've also had the task of having to cut assignments down because I know that some of these things are a little too higher order to what they're actually learning and what their goals are right now in their IEP. So I'm aware that because I have a teaching certificate and that I've had experience teaching, that teachers may have trusted me more to make these changes. But I think that even if you run something by a teacher aide before a lesson is given, we really can, use them as a great resource, because you never know, they might see something that you don't see. With that said, I think it might be best to encourage you to sit down at least once a week, or try to sit down with them once a week, because I know we all have busy schedules, to meet with your teacher aide to get feedback. Because don't forget, we're in the back of the room running around and assisting the kids too. We may see things that you don't see, and we may have ideas as to how to fix a lesson for your next class, or we can tell you when something wasn't as engaging as you thought it was. Use this as a resource for change. I know that in the middle and high school grades, this may be a challenge, but if you have a chance to do this, I feel like it really could help. Teacher aides may also have something to add to your classroom, and I encourage you to take advantage of it. Some of my favorite days on the job have been when teachers have given me the floor to read a chapter of the novel to the class, or to teach them about different types of poetry, or even to just add some insight into the topic being discussed. I think that sometimes students think of the aides in the classroom as the quiet adult in the back, and if we can bring them to the front on occasion, it can make the classroom more well-rounded. Of course, this may not be an everyday occurrence, but I assure you it makes our day a lot less dull when we can be a part of the action. My last tip may only apply to my experiences, but I think it's something that should be discussed. And I'm going to call this topic, and I put it in my Google Drive this way, as in an ideal world, you'll give us a voice, or how Jess complains about not being a part of meetings. Let me preface this by saying I get it. I understand that it may not be appropriate for someone who isn't a classroom teacher to be a part of the parent-teacher meeting, but I find it odd that this is the case. Aides are in the classroom with these students the majority of the day too, often traveling with them to their unified arts classes and even doing recess or lunch duty. We see things the classroom teachers may not see. We may have insight that could help everyone involved. So when we have a parent meeting and the door closes and the aides are left outside, it really bothers me. It also bothers me that a lot of the confidential information about our students is kept between classroom teachers and the social worker and the guidance counselor and the school psychologist, and not passed down to the aides on a lot of occasions. Most of these meetings we have with guidance counselors or with social workers are during teachers' common planning time, where teachers meet to discuss those students and other important items. Aides are not part of these meetings, at least in the districts that I've worked in, and it's often lost on us that certain things like Jimmy's parents are going through a huge divorce and that's why he's been acting out in class lately, or that Mary is borderline homeless and we need to take that in consideration. It's one of my biggest pet peeves about this job. In an ideal world, I would really like to see this change. Now, this may be something that is only in certain cases, and maybe teacher aides are involved in all of these things. So I really would encourage you guys to share your insight on this, because it's definitely one of my biggest pet peeves about being a teacher aide. Okay, so now that I've blabbled about what teachers can do effectively to use their aides in the classroom, I want to talk to the other teacher aides out there. So first, let me just say hello to all of you. I think this could be a great opportunity to share some nuggets of wisdom for those just starting out as a teacher aide and for veterans who are burnt out. Before I start, I do want to say that for student teachers who are just finishing their student teaching, I think it might be a really great idea to be a paraprofessional the year after you finish your student teaching, unless you are, lucky enough to get your classroom first, right out of the gate, which I would be very jealous of you, but I think that would be a great thing too. The reason why I say this is I think that my school, at least my school, didn't really prepare me for the types of behavior issues or the types of special ed issues that I could be exposed to in the classroom. And being a teacher aide for these past 2.5 years has been really, really helpful in terms of learning about how to differentiate, how to deal with all sorts of different types of students, to observe other types of classrooms that you may not see doing your student teaching. So I think that if it's the summer after your student teaching and you still haven't found a job, apply for a para job, because first of all, it's a foot in the door, but also it's a really great opportunity for you to learn something that you might not have been able to see as a student teacher. So anyway, let's begin by giving some more tips. So in my Google Hangout, or my Google Drive folder thing, whatever you call it, I posted an article that I found on Facebook that a coworker sent to a bunch of teachers at the school I worked at, called "Hovering or Helping: The Role of the Paraprofessionals," and it's by a website called swiftschools.org. I haven't actually looked at their website further, but I read this article and I really enjoyed it. So this article discusses how aides, especially when working with students with special needs, often hover around the student instead of actually helping them. The argument is that we aren't hired to work with this student or these students 100% of the time, and by not allowing them to flourish on their own at times, we may be affording them the opportunity to rely on adults more than their peers, and often maybe hinder their relationships with their peers as well. I think this is a great idea, and I've always had the opportunity, or I've always tried to not hover around students when I work with them. If you can get a student settled in, check in with them a few times during the activity, I think it's better than literally sitting next to the kid and helping them. And I think some teachers require us sometimes to sit next to the student, and I just want also teachers to know that that kind of hurts them as well. And it also makes them stick out like a sore thumb. Of course, there are always exceptions to this rule, like I've pulled students out to do individualized reading, or we may have an alternate lesson for a student that that might not be able to handle a certain activity in the classroom, so we may be working with that student one-on-one. But please try and make that effort to just check in, then walk away. There are probably 18 or 20 other students who may need your help in the classroom, and check in with them too. Remember, you are a second adult and a second resource in the classroom, so all students should be able to benefit from your assistance. I encourage you to read this article on my Google folder to get some more tips, because I think it's a really nice springboard to kind of thinking about how you actually work in the classroom. Another tip for teachers is to make sure you are organized. I keep a folder for every single class that I am in with students, and I always make sure to get a second copy of a handout that a teacher gives out to the students. This gives me the opportunity to do two things. One, have an extra copy if a kid loses it, and two, to quickly do the worksheet while the teacher is reading the instructions. That way, when it's time to float around and it's independent time, I actually have the answers and can be able to explain to them what the answer may be, or lead them that way, as opposed to looking kind of like a fool. This is really important, especially in math. From my experiences, when I started out as a teacher aide, I hadn't seen 7th and 8th grade math since I was in 7th and 8th grade. So if you do the work, you're better off explaining that process and you don't look like a fool. And in the middle grades, they can see you sweat. So another thing in terms of organization is to always keep a schedule with you. The middle grades often have a crazy schedule that rotates each day, so it's hard to remember sometimes where you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be there. So make sure you keep that schedule with you so that you don't end up in the wrong place. And it also gives a model to the students as well that you're really organized, and that some of those kids need that model of organization too. So it's also good to have. Tip number 3. Leave the cell phone on your desk or your purse or wherever you keep your personal belongings. I cannot even begin to tell you how many teacher aides I've seen get in trouble for doing their Christmas shopping while sitting in the back of the classroom and while students are doing independent work, or other crazy things like that, like paying bills, or it's not necessary. I'll admit I'm not perfect at this. I had my desk in the back of the science classroom, and I would make my hover around and check my email and then hover back. But I do think that leaving the distractions somewhere else, because you need to focus on your students. And this could be a teacher tip too, but whatever. And last and most importantly, I think it's important to be a team player. You may not click with every teacher that you work with, and you may not agree with the things that are being done in the classroom. But it's important that you maintain a great working relationship with these people. You are all there for the same reason, for the students. So be willing to help in any way that you can, and I assure you the school year will be a great one. Well, I think that's enough out of me, and I look forward to hearing about all of your experiences working with aides in the classroom. And I hope this video will help, that I didn't ramble too much. I will be posting a date for this Q&A that we're supposed to have shortly, so keep an eye out for that, and I look forward to trying that out because I actually haven't done a Google Hangout. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.